The 43rd ASEAN Summit, held recently in the Indonesian capital Jakarta, witnessed an unprecedented scale of participation, drawing a multitude of international representatives, including the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund, underscoring its high significance. The summit's theme was ASEAN Essentials, the Center for Growth. Despite recent U.S. efforts to manipulate issues such as the South China Sea in an attempt to sway ASEAN's allegiance, ASEAN nations remain steadfast in their commitment to independence and unity. They have reiterated their determination to collaborate in driving economic recovery and growth, enhancing economic integration, emphasizing regional peace and development, and reaffirming that ASEAN will not be a proxy for any country. According to sources, Indonesia had actively worked to secure a visit by U.S. President Biden to Indonesia and his attendance at the summit, but Biden declined, citing health reasons, with Vice President Harris attending in his place. Interestingly, Biden did participate in the G20 summit held in India from September 9th to 10th, and subsequently visited ASEAN member Vietnam, suggesting his health was not a significant concern. Former Indonesian Foreign Minister Marty Natalegawa commented that Biden's absence was disappointing and carried symbolic significance, appearing as if Biden intentionally skipped the ASEAN summit hosted by Indonesia. Analysts view this as a signal of U.S. dissatisfaction with ASEAN, indicating that the U.S. lacks interest in the conference theme of regional economic growth, and is primarily focused on geopolitical tensions, such as inflating issues like freedom of navigation in the South China Sea and disputes over South China Sea islands. During the ASEAN summit, Vice President Harris advocated that the United States would continue to fulfill its commitments to ASEAN, increase investments in the region, and compete with China, continually provoking tensions between China and ASEAN. While the U.S. outwardly claims not to compel nations to choose sides between China and the U.S., U.S. officials repeatedly caution ASEAN officials to reject the Belt and Road Initiative and exert pressure on ASEAN countries to reduce economic and technological dependence on China, cancel security cooperation with China, effectively pushing ASEAN nations to pick sides. As the rotating chair of ASEAN, Indonesia emphasized during the opening ceremony that ASEAN unanimously agrees not to be a proxy for any country. Indonesian President Joko also issued a specific call to the United States, saying, "The United States should be a positive force, ensuring that the Indo-Pacific region remains a peaceful, stable, and prosperous one through inclusivity and cooperation. Let ASEAN be a platform for cooperation, not a stage for disruptive competition." Indonesian Foreign Minister Retno reiterated in her speech that ASEAN should not be a stage for great power competition, but should be a platform for cooperation, emphasizing the need for ASEAN and other regional nations to work together to maintain peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. Leaders of other ASEAN nations share similar views. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen expressed concern about the escalation of geopolitical competition, making it difficult for some countries to find a neutral point that supports inclusive cooperation and peaceful coexistence. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar believes that ASEAN must continually uphold its central role, prevent external powers from engaging in divisive activities, and protect ASEAN's achievements from disruption caused by unbridled competition. The collective stance of the 10 ASEAN nations indicates their vigilance against forces that seek to coerce ASEAN into joining great power confrontations. ASEAN repeatedly asserts that it will not be a proxy for any country, signaling to the world that it rejects being embroiled in geopolitical whirlwinds. However, at this critical juncture, the United States and the Philippines conducted joint patrols in waters not far from China's South China Sea islands, garnering international attention for the first-ever such action in the region by the two countries. The Western Command of the Philippines claimed that this action aimed to test and improve maritime norms, but deeper analysis suggests that as the U.S. deepens its involvement in South China Sea affairs, The Philippines' wavering and vacillation on its South China Sea policy also increase. The joint action by the United States and the Philippines is highly provocative and symbolic, as the location of the military exercise is near Chinese territory and the timing coincided with the ASEAN summit. Clearly, this move is intended to disrupt the ASEAN countries' positions on the South China Sea issue. This action not only disrupts the positions of ASEAN countries on the South China Sea issue, but also reveals the U.S. strategic intentions in the South China Sea. Firstly, the Philippines, as a neighbor of China's South China Sea islands, has consistently claimed sovereignty over parts of the South China Sea. As a U.S. ally, the Philippines closely cooperates with the United States on the South China Sea issue. This military exercise is, in essence, a challenge to China, as the U.S. presence and intervention in the South China Sea region undoubtedly provide security and diplomatic support to the Philippines, solidifying its reliance on the United States. Secondly, from a military perspective, the joint U.S.-Philippines patrol is a direct challenge to China's growing naval capabilities in the South China Sea. The United States has long viewed the South China Sea as the core of its Asia-Pacific strategy. Through this military exercise, the United States seeks to bolster its military presence in the region and attempt to diminish China's influence in the South China Sea through military deterrence. Moreover, from a political standpoint, the United States aims to disrupt the unity of ASEAN countries on the South China Sea issue through joint patrols. While most ASEAN countries have disputes with China in the South China Sea, the majority advocate for resolving disputes through peaceful negotiations and diplomacy. The U.S. actions add extra pressure on ASEAN countries, attempting to divide ASEAN and push them towards adopting a more hardline stance against China on the international stage. Lastly, from an economic perspective, joint U.S.-Philippines patrols pose a threat to China's economic and trade interests in the South China Sea region. China's Belt and Road Initiative has made the South China Sea a crucial maritime trade route. Through joint patrols, the United States seeks to control shipping in the region, thereby diminishing China's influence in the economic and trade domains. The joint U.S.-Philippines military exercise reflects the U.S. strategic layout in the Asia-Pacific region and its strategy of containment towards China. The United States aims to create tension in the region through joint military exercises while disrupting ASEAN countries' positions on the South China Sea issue. However, the provocative and symbolic nature of this joint military exercise far outweighs its actual impact. China possesses sufficient military strength to protect its interests in the South China Sea and has consistently advocated for peaceful dispute resolution. U.S. intervention and threats only serve to further strengthen China's determination to defend its rights. At the same time, ASEAN countries are acutely aware that relying on the United States will not resolve the challenges they face in the South China Sea. They need to engage in dialogue and negotiation with China to find effective solutions to the problems. Collectively, ASEAN countries hold significant power and influence, which no external force can ignore. Therefore, in the face of the joint U.S.-Philippines patrols in the South China Sea, ASEAN countries should steadfastly defend their interests and positions, collectively address external disruptions and challenges, and contribute to regional peace and stability. ASEAN nations need to strengthen internal cooperation, especially in the economic field, promote connectivity and trade facilitation, actively advocate for multilateralism, and collaborate with the international community to address global issues such as climate change and terrorism, working towards a more prosperous, stable, and sustainable region. Thank you for your viewership.